Cloaked as she was, the figure looming below us was unmistakably feminine. Even beneath the haphazard layers of her tattered cape and cowl, we knew it was an earthly woman. Strange that a queen should be draped in rags, literal rags that had been hastily quilted together for her. The Grimalkin had not journeyed here in this garment. It had been fashioned for her upon the Lost Isles. From scraps of fabric her now dead underlings had scavenged from the ruins of their civilization. At some point since her arrival, the witch had transformed herself back, reverting from her feline form to her human one, hence the need for this cloak. The deep hood and the shadow it cast over her face was as good as any mask and withheld the visage of our enemy. She couldn't see us any better than we could her, but the witch knew we were here nevertheless. It was weird. We could somehow sense that she sensed us, like feeling a hand reaching for you in the dark. The Grimalkin was unnaturally still save for her breathing, which was itself suspicious in its slow, methodical, sleep-like motion. She was in a meditative trance of some kind. She had become physically senseless in order to become mentally sensitive. The witch was casting her awareness outward in a field around her. It was a magic radar, pretty much, and now she had 6 blips on her screen. May motioned for us to spread out, to creep stealthily through the ring of rubble until we had our enemy surrounded. Before our leader could cue the attack, however, her lifted hand came suddenly back down, drawn to her temple. The amalgam was wincing and shaking her head. I didn't have to guess what was wrong, as I felt it too. All of us did. It was the same awful sensation that had come over us before climbing the heap of debris, an intense sting of dread. We suddenly wanted nothing more than to abandon our mission. This, we knew, was the work of the witch, her first line of defense. She had sunk into her trance not only to find us mentally, but to turn us back. However, just as before, another, stronger influence interceded. But this time I noticed that May's mouth was moving with silent words. She was calling on the power of her god again, and again she got an answer. A loud one. Not only was the Grimalkin's attack repelled, but it thrust her out of the trance. Below us, in the makeshift arena, the cloaked form reeled backward as if from a physical blow. Her mental attack had failed, so she would have to fight us in the more conventional sense. Well, sorta. She still had plenty of the dark arts to wield against us. Like I said previously, we'd fought a lot of strange enemies with strange powers, but this was our first witch, and the first time we'd come up against actual magic. And what a total hassle it would be. This is the Endless Elsewhere podcast, Chapter 20, The Dark Heart. With her defenses thrown down, we were now free to charge her. The Grimalkin knew this was coming and sought to delay our attack. She did so in a surprising way. The sorceress unhooded herself, then shrugged off what remained of the cloak. The patchwork garment cascaded to the ground, piling around her feet. The witch wanted to shock us, to stun us into immobility with the mere sight of her. And it worked. Standing there before us was not the denuded form of a woman. For as mystifying and ghastly as the sight was to behold, the cause of it was surprisingly obvious. As we had seen with both the werewolves and the merfolk, her powers for transmogrification were as strong as ever. So it was, perhaps, the power to change herself that had diminished over time. Or perhaps it was simply the memory of how to do so that had slipped from this ancient creature. Recall, listener, that she had sat purring in the lap of Clarence Grindle as far back as the late 1800s, and there was no telling how long she had been mincing around the land of phantoms as a cat before the traveler of time and space came along. I don't pretend to know how her magic worked, or didn't work, but clearly when she tried to revert from cat to woman, the result was a frightful mixture of the two forms, as if the process had been interrupted halfway through. She was humanoid, as we had perceived even beneath the cloak, but now in its absence, we could see that over every inch of the sorceress bristled thin, black fur. I think she had been trying to straighten out her arms and legs since the transformation, but both pairs were still bent slightly from the ages she had spent on all fours. At the extent of each of these limbs was a weird, articulated paw. It was easy to see where fingers and toes had tried to reform and been halted. The feline padding remained, as had the retractable claws, I then saw, when they came arching out into view. If her magic wasn't strong enough, the Grimalkin was going to claw our eyes out. Her head was human in shape, but through the long black hair pushed a pair of twitching chevron ears. These had lain flat under the hood, but were now erect and alert. Of all her warped contouring, it was the face of the sorceress that was the most disturbing, because it was here that the feline and human features had blended most complexly. The witch had retained her cheekbones, but between them, her nose was now a triangular snout, complete with whiskers. Likewise, she had retained her mouth, but it was now lined in fanged teeth, which, like her claws, were aggressively on display. But it was her eyes that were the most hideous of all. More burning than glowing around her vertically slitted pupils was a ghostly luminescence. Within her blazed a purple flame. We had seen this before from the mainland, flaring through the fog on this very island. Hers was not the bioluminescence of the Strangels. The winged people of this world had naturally radiant eyes. Hers was decidedly unnatural, supernatural. I don't even want to describe it as light, when it was all and only darkness. We'd stoked the fire, and now it would burn us. Having revealed herself to us, the witch then revealed her power as well. Those terrible eyes climbed the rubble heap as she began to rotate slowly in the arena, passing her malicious gaze from one of us to the next. As she did, the Grimalkin began clawing at the air, what I thought was another animalistic display. It was not. The witch looked like a conductor of an orchestra, waving her pawed hands frantically about. She was, in actuality, beckoning unseen forces to her, conjuring from the ether arcane elements to be mixed and molded invisibly. This power began to manifest in the form of a light, or dark light, as it was the same bioluminescence that lived behind her eyes. What materialized was an effervescent fireball, or firebolt, really. It was more like flaming lightning. Then, when it seemed the wicked energy was too much for her to hold any longer, the Grimalkin twisted suddenly and released it, sending the firebolt toward May. The witch either knew she was our leader, or that it was May who'd prayed away her mental attack, or both. But what the sorceress didn't know about the amalgam was that she had the reflexes of a warrior. May ducked and even slid back down the debris slope just as the flaring discharge cleaved off the top section of it where she'd been standing. Enormous boulders of rubble were dashed to pebbles and dust. This was the power our enemy had used to bring down the dragon, then a bridge, and now she intended it for us. For as devastating as it was, this particular magic required precious seconds to summon and form. We could not give her another opportunity to do so. May, bounding back up the rubble, shouted for us to attack. As soon as the amalgam reached the top again, the 6 of us charged the Grimalkin from every side. May and the aerials used their wings to swoop into the arena, and so were the first into the fight. But so too were they the first to learn that the witch had other, lesser powers that she could call upon more quickly. That horrid glow of hers appeared again, and she flung it out against the Strangels. It struck them as a wave in the ocean would, and sent all 3 sprawling backward to the ground. No sooner were they on the arena floor than were Joseph, Clyde, and I, the 3 of us having descended the slope. Our trio rushed the enemy. We were to surround her, stabbing at her in a manic frenzy. All we needed was a single death blow to get through. But alas, we were not quick enough. The Grimalkin twisted sharply around, flinging another wave of her purple witchcraft in a wide arc. The blast of it thrust us all violently in reverse. We landed hard on our backs, and from there slid through the dirt. We needed a minute to recover, but we didn't have a minute. The Strangels were back on their feet now, so we had to be as well. As our group had at the top of the rubble heap, we once again surrounded the Grimalkin and, as before, she turned slowly to stare us all down. A fanged, taunting smile formed on her face. The witch was ready for round 2. We were not. Our best and only plan, to assail the witch all at once and overwhelm her, failed every time, so we turned to other tactics. Mae tried to break through one of the purple waves. Clyde threw his harpoon from afar. Remy flew into the air and dove down from above. Joseph and I took turns distracting the Grimalkin from one side as the other came at her from the opposite. And Flo, who'd sworn that she would prove herself, kept shrinking back from the action. So yeah, nothing we did worked. There was just no getting past the witch's power, nor was there an end to it. That is to say, she wasn't running out of magic or stamina. Even fighting 6 opponents, she wasn't tiring out. But we were. There's only so many times you can go careening headlong into the fray, only to be blown backward. It was a pace we couldn't keep up. And equal to the fatigue were the injuries. None of our wounds were serious, but they were starting to add up. At some point, we lost our ability to rebound. We just couldn't get back up fast enough. Then we gave the witch what she wanted. Those precious few seconds to conjure up her mightiest weapon, the firebolt. The dark light began to form in her pawed hands again. Instead of intending it for Mae, the sorceress looked to my husband, whom she'd been eyeing more and more as the fight raged on. I don't know why she'd taken a special interest in the man from Earth, but now, of us all, she intended to destroy him first. Maybe it was his appearance and clothing. He had reminded others of Jonas Gentry. Perhaps he reminded the witch of this man as well. She stalked toward Joseph as the dark light charged in strength and radiance. Exhausted and hurting, he still got himself upright, but then faltered backward and fell against the wall of rubble. He, at first, twisted sharply away, thinking he could clamber up and over, but just as soon realized he wouldn't make it. And so he turned back to bravely face the Grimalkin. If this was his doom, he would look it in the eye. Now, obviously I wasn't about to let some witch make me a widow. I used my saber as a cane to get myself up and going, but for as determined as I was, I couldn't get there in time. So as I staggered forward, I reached out. Physically, yes, I extended my hand, but it was also, more so, spiritually that I reached out. I did as Mae had done. I called to the mountaintop presence, and even though I was a stranger in this world, its god heard my voice. The Grimalkin's firebolt shuddered, then began to evaporate in her pawed hands, the invisible elements dismantling and slipping back into the ether from which they had been summoned. The Grimalkin hissed, furious. I foresaw her next move. The witch would pounce at Joseph, ripping into him with her fangs and claws. Knowing it would get to her before me, I wound back and threw my sword across the arena. I'd hoped to bury it in the witch's back, but the saber went past my target and glanced off the rubble heap. However, it had fallen to my husband's side and he dove to snatch it up just as the Grimalkin sprang at him. Joseph had no sooner taken hold of the sword than he rose back up with it, swinging the blade in a wide arc, perfectly unfastening the witch's head from her body. Thunderstruck by the sudden end of our foe, all of us looked to the head as it fell and rolled, a sprinkling of dark blood following the decapitated thing through the dirt. We watched and waited tensely for the dark light in the eyes of it to extinguish. It flickered once more, then went out. Now we could be sure that she was dead. Even before her teetering trunk finally collapsed, we knew the Grimalkin had been vanquished. Mae and Clyde appeared on either side of my husband, both having been on their way to aid him, as I was, before he'd abruptly slain the witch. It had all happened in a blur of mere seconds. The amalgam gave my husband a well done, while the aquatic gave him one of those gigantic smiles. I even saw Remy nod respectfully to Joseph from across the arena. Looking to Flo, she stood with a hand over her mouth, more horrified by the gory violence than relieved by its outcome. Appreciative of their accolades, my husband was quick to say that it was not his deed that had won the day. He knew that something above us all had intervened on our behalf. And for he and I, this wasn't the first time. Previously on this podcast, I have said, rather offhandedly, that there seemed to be a higher power at work in our favor, that Joseph and I had survived and even been victorious over foes who, by all rights, should have easily defeated us, killed us. Monsters of every kind, a time traveler, a secret society, and now a sorceress. But that would mean the higher power on this world was the same as the one on Earth, that I had not called to the god of this world, but of them all. But those thoughts were too heavy for me to carry at the moment, and I set them down for now. I got to my feet just as Joseph and Mae came forward. My husband handed the saber back to me, and I returned it to the scabbard.
You okay?
Yeah, I think so. You?
I'm good. First time I, ever had to decapitate a witch, but yeah, I'm good. So is this enough, Maevalesse? Have we completed the quest?
Yes, and we are now free to return.
Should we take some kind of proof back with us?
You want me to go, grab her head, or...?
Ew, no. Babe, gross.
We will not require evidence.
Will Bruce and the rest of your people believe us, though?
They will believe him.
May looked to Remy, directing our attention to him as well. His own gaze was lowered to the dead witch as he grappled with his thoughts. The Ariel was a member of the cadre, with zero reason to return with a favorable report about us. But May knew he would tell the truth. He would testify that Joseph and I, the earthly intruders, had come here and slain a powerful enemy from our own world. In fact, as we would see in coming days, Remy would be going back a different man. Whether he was conscious of it yet or not, the quest had altered his perspective, changed his heart, but he wouldn't yet speak of it, let alone apologize for his previous unkindness. It was too soon for all of that, but it was clear that he'd turned a corner and was going a better way. Clyde was the first to scale the rubble heap, the rest of us following after. We stayed back as he alone went to sea. The aquatic soon resurfaced on the back of the Leviathan. When the creature beached itself, we moved down the shore, then us flightless people climbed atop it. Remy offered the fifth seat to Flo as it was her turn, but she declined and opted to fly once again. Then our group departed from the centermost link of the island chain, from the dark heart of it. We rowed and flew across the channel. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew the archipelago was vanishing into the fog behind me. The strangers were right. The Lost Isles did not belong to this world anymore. The Leviathan returned us to the mainland, where we were deposited on the same beach from which we'd set off. Clyde did not dismount, however. He signed to Remy, explaining that he must now return to his own people and tell of all that happened here. We waved our farewells to him and he to us as the Leviathan wriggled backward into the water and sank beneath the surface. Coming to the ocean had been fraught with so much hardship and danger, but so too had we made a good friend. I hoped very much that we would see Clyde again. Then it was back to our own mounts. The manticores awaited us at the top of the dunes, growing ever more excited as we climbed up to them. We were no less happy with the reunion, embracing and petting the animals with near tearfulness. Our satchels became saddlebags again, I peeking into mine to check on the contact charger I'd stolen from the bunker. It appeared to have survived the conflict undamaged. All of us, riders and ridden alike, were eager to leave, so we were soon on our way. The manticores had eaten and rested during our absence, but more importantly, they had healed, so they carried us with restored vigor and speed. We rode for what remained of the day, leaving the coast and, at last, that dreadful fog behind. We were eager to get home, what was home for all of us now, hopefully. Joseph and I had earned our place with the Strangels and wished to take it as soon as possible. Had we been able, our little caravan would have journeyed without pause, but we had to make camp when the shades of night were drawn. Even still, the hard part was over. We could relax now. Around the fire, we sat and ate and spoke. Remy was lively and talkative, whereas May and Flo had become reserved and quiet. They both seemed burdened. They knew, or at least sensed, something that their fellow Strangel did not, something that had eluded their human companions as well. This concerned me. And just when it seemed like we could finally let our guard down, had we missed something? Whatever it was, they were not sharing. In previous conflicts of ours, Joseph and I had learned the master plan of our enemies before defeating them, but we dispatched the Grimalkin without ever learning her ultimate goal. That is to say, she hadn't monologued before the battle. Not that she could have told us anything anyway. The witch had some form of mental power, as we'd experienced, but she could not read our thoughts or make us read her own. It was only with raw emotion that the sorceress communicated. As for speech, she'd either long forgotten her original tongue or was unable to speak it in her mutated form. Besides, even as an earthly language, whatever it was, chances are it wasn't modern English. Neither Joseph nor I would have understood her anyway. As a result, the Grimalkin had taken her objective into whatever hell stood open to her, and the not knowing started to gnaw at us. Later that night, when the others had gone to sleep, Joseph and I hashed it out quietly between ourselves. If we could deduce her scheme, then maybe we could give ourselves some kind of closure.
The Grimalkin must have learned of the Nephilim through the Atlanteans, and that's why she came to the Lost Isles, to find and claim their power. My guess is that it wasn't what she was expecting. While the giants were master alchemists, their dark arts were tied to their technology, something the ancient witch would have no concept of.
It's also possible that she had no real plan at all. You saw how she was, more animal than human. Maybe she was like any other beast, just trying to extend her territory. Or maybe it was the Atlanteans who actually brought her to the Lost Isles. Worshipping her as they did, maybe they were trying to provide their goddess with a kingdom, or hoping she'd restart their own.
I guess we'll never know.
But we would know. We would have the desires of the Grimalkin revealed to us in full, and they were so much worse than we could have ever fathomed. I think the disclosure was all the more horrifying as it came at one of the most unexpected times. If not for this event, I would have glossed over our return trip. This should have been the part of the story with no new discoveries to report, as we simply retraced the same path as before. But it was during the most monotonous leg of our journey home that we had the profoundest revelation. It came days after leaving the shore, when we'd once more entered the plains region and found the wreckage of the dirigible. We'd stopped here to rest. Had we not, our group may have never learned the secret, never learned that we had not left the dark heart behind in the sea, but that it had been with us always, carried in the chest of one of our companions. May and Flo had remained detached and brooding. We had heard almost nothing from either during the trek. Their companions had grown accustomed to their silence, so we startled terribly when the one suddenly screamed at the other.
Deceiver!
What? Whoa, May, what's up?
Maevalesse?
Betrayer!
May? What?
Confess it, Flodoorwen!
What is she talking about, Flo?
She's mad.
Yeah, I can see that.
No, insane.
It is not I who has lost her reason, but you. How could you have done this?
Maevalesse, what are you talking about?
It was this airship.
Okay, the old wreckage. What about it?
She knew where it was.
Yeah, on our way here. She spotted it from the air. What of it?
But she did not see it. She lied. She knew where it was because she had been this way.
I not understand.
May, you're coming off pretty crazy here. Please explain.
During the sickness, when she left the castle, she did not do so in cowardice, but to journey across the sea to find the witch. You have been in league with her all this time. How could you do this to us? To me, you were my friend, my sister.
Sister? I see what you do to sisters, Maevalesse. You're no sister of mine. You half-breed filth made by monsters to kill my kind. I am the world of your poison.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. None of us could. Joseph, Remy, and I could only gawk at Flo. Surely she was making a terrible joke. When she did not laugh, I blinked and shook my head, bewildered. She was serious. That's when our disbelief was quickly replaced with horror, and it only got worse from there. May kept interrogating, and Flo kept confessing. She admitted to every accusation leveled against her. The Ariel had learned of the Grimalkin from Gentry, from yarns he'd spun around the campfire while they were all here in the plains ages ago on their expedition to round up the manticores. Flo had sacrificed her reputation and become known as a coward by fleeing Airy Castle during the plague. She'd used that as a pretext to go across the sea. I doubted that this was physically possible, but Joseph later told me that according to the books, there was at least one islet along the way to the other continent. Flo would have had a place to rest and eat, making it possible for her to have flown the distance. She had reached the other land, the home of her people's banished enemies, and somehow been granted an audience with the Grimalkin. But how had they made their alliance when the language barrier was impossibly high? It must have been the witch's emotive sorcery. They communicated with their feelings, which sounds like some hippy-dippy stuff, I know, but it seems to have worked. Emotions transcend all spoken words, so even two people from different planets could use them to sync with one another. This method of communication was inefficient and arduous, certainly, but there was one quality of it that surpassed all others. They could have an exchange over any expanse, across a whole continent or even an ocean. So when the Ariel returned to her people, she had an open channel to the witch, and this is how they had plotted together from afar. But what exactly was the plan? What was her agreement with the Grimalkin? With the cat now out of the bag, so to speak, Flo did not hesitate to tell us everything. She seemed strangely proud to do so. Just as we had deduced, the Atlantean remnant had worshipped the cat as their goddess for decades now. In all that time spent among them, she'd used her powers to slowly glean their past. The Grimalkin learned of their former civilization, but it was of no wonder to her. The witch had seen many rise and fall in her time. The Grimalkin also learned of their former masters, but the giants too meant little to her. She knew of the Nephilim from the ancient past of Earth. One had even lived in the land of phantoms with her. But then, finally, the Atlanteans revealed something that piqued the Grimalkin's interest. The reason for a great war that had been waged on this world. On the Ariel's mountain, behind castle and temple walls, was something they called the limpid font, a pool of water with a unique power, and she wanted it. Okay, listener, now this next part did not come from Flo, but from Joseph and I. We pieced it together later, but the realization is worth imparting now. Because of our shared experience with Clarence Grindle, we understood better than anyone the Grimalkin's desire for the limpid font. Stick with me. As we've gone over before, to be submerged in the water of this fountain was to resurface in the spirit realm without the necessity of death, what I've described as something akin to Grindel's power. And this is what the witch was after, what she had been after for quite some time. For all the magic under her control, the Traveler of Time and Space could do something that she could not. He could disconnect his spirit from his body and travel the astral plane. This made him a deity, in her eyes anyway, and she wished to share in that godhood. This is why the Grimalkin had remained with him, masquerading as his pet for all those years in the land of phantoms. It's doubtful that Grindel ever even knew that she was more than just a cat. She had sat purring in his lap, using her own powers to glean what she could from the Traveler, trying to steal his secret. Yet she never did, at least not fully. The mental power she had used against us was similar to Grindel's, and it was probably learned from him, yet she had never figured out how to detach her consciousness from her corporeal form. But here, on this far-flung world, this power was ready for the taking. However, the sorceress knew from the Atlanteans that even a full-scale attack on the mountain would fail. Brute force was not the answer. Not that she had an army of soldiers or a fleet of airships anyway, but now the Grimalkin had Flo, someone on the inside to do her bidding from the shadows. After they'd struck their bargain, the Ariel went ahead of the witch, back to the castle. Flo would prepare the way for her accomplice as she and her Atlanteans made the voyage across the sea. They'd eventually reach the Lost Isles and there waited, but the Grimalkin's true destination was never the archipelago. That was just a layover. She had her eyes on the mountain. Before she could approach the domain of the Strangels, there were obstacles for the witch and her emissary to tear down first. They had to lower the Strangels' spiritual defenses, as the winged people would sense her coming with their powers of discernment. The two of them would also have to remove the human defender, Jonas Gentry. If they could fell these two walls, those of the castle and the temple would not be enough to stop them. The prejudice against humans and amalgams had always existed in pockets among the Ariels, but the two conspirators exploited it, organized it. The rise of the cadre had been their doing, and the group had spread their hate well. It had infected just enough of the Strangel population to make it impossible to know the witch was coming, let alone when she actually appeared among them. The presence of the Grimalkin would not be felt. She would simply blend in with all the other evil they had sown in the community. As we know, the cadre was then used to oust the Earthman. The way was clear for the Grimalkin, but just when they'd gotten rid of the human, two more came along. Joseph and I had thrown a monkey wrench into their plan. Flo had a solution for that, too. She'd proposed the quest. And we thought she was saving us from banishment. Flo, according to their arrangement, had prepared the castle for the witch and was supposed to go out to meet the Grimalkin and escort her back here. Now Flo had the perfect excuse to make the journey. The quest had been a sham from the start. Flo had simply taken us along for the ride. It was a ride we were not to have survived. All of my own personal experience with the Ariel was then recontextualized. Remember, I would wake in the night to find her muttering. The Ariel claimed to be praying, but she was conferring, communing with her partner from afar. I wondered if Flo had ever planned to simply kill us in our sleep. She may have entertained the idea, but reconsidered it. Flo would have only gotten one or two of us before waking the others and being overcome. Then she'd be exposed, and her evil plot endangered. Or maybe she'd absolutely intended to spear us in our sleep. Maybe it was on nights like this that I was mysteriously awakened, what became a common occurrence, as you know, listener. Perhaps it was no coincidence at all. Perhaps I was being roused to thwart her. If not by her own hands, Flo assumed we'd be killed off by her partner's other cohorts, the werewolves, the merfolk, but we'd bested them all, and no thanks to Flo. The Ariel was no coward. She had not withdrawn from the various conflicts any more than she had the plague. No, she was standing back, watching, waiting, hoping for us to be overcome by the monsters. I thought of the merman episode in which she'd brought a live one to shore, unharmed. It had been no accident. She was helping them. But again, our group just wouldn't die and kept going, eventually getting as far as the witch herself, who we also destroyed. Flo had been horrified by this, not because her partner was dead, but because the witch had died in the wrong place at the wrong time. You see, Flo had planned to double-cross her, to get the Grimalkin into the castle but then expose her, kill her publicly before she reached the limpid font. The demonstration was to have shocked her people into action. Flo sought to have the orb destroyed or buried. Having slain the invading witch, they would have listened when she called for the disuse of the orb so that their world would never again be sullied by the pollution of Earth. Yes, Flo wanted to use the witch to her own end, then dispatch her. I wondered how the Ariel had kept all that hate from being sensed by the Grimalkin when that was one of her powers. But then, Flo was exceptionally skilled at hiding who she really was. She'd certainly fooled all of us. But why? From what wellspring did this hatred for my world come? Like Remy, I assumed she'd learned to detest humankind while on their mission to Earth, when they were repeatedly attacked by the people they'd been sent to save. But this was not so. Flo's enmity had been born upon their return. As she then told us, Flo and their now dead companion, Zolanway, had developed a relationship while on my world. They'd kept it quiet, however. The two had planned to marry upon their return. But then, as you know, Zolanway became ill, and before he died of it, spread an earthly virus to their people, which claimed more lives than just his own. All of Flo's love for him inverted into a loathing for Earth and all its wretchedness. Yeah, so much for no monologues this season.
Took him from me! Took everything! Their people only take, only kill!
Flodoorwen, the sickness took Zolanway. He was not killed by humans.
Humans are disease, infecting our world!
Flo, I know you've been wronged, but please.
Atlantean!
What?
What you call humans here from long ago. But you are same, all same. Thousands years and still same. No change. Only take, only kill.
Flodoorwen, you are wrong. I was wrong.
Flo turned to Remy. He withered under her gaze, seeing in his fellow Ariel something worse than in himself, a hate that descended to unknowable depths. He had been xenophobic, but she was genocidal. Then she turned her leering eyes to Joseph and I. Flo was going to rid her planet of every last trace of humanity, starting with us. When her grip tightened around the spear, we braced ourselves. It felt wrong to square off with her, our friend. The fact that she was our enemy hadn't really sunk in yet. It was a whiplash of emotions. It would have been folly for her to take on both of us, all of us, as the other strangers would have come to our defense. And she knew it, but Flo also knew that she did not have to bother. She would return to the castle, tell Bruce and the others that we had found the witch but failed our mission. She would convince them that her companions were now under the thrall of the Grimalkin and were coming to attack the castle. The Ariel would put on one of her shows, tearfully telling them how she had narrowly escaped the same fate. They would believe her. Everyone always did, and we wouldn't get much of a chance to explain ourselves. The cadre would ignore us humans and our amalgam leader, but instead turn to Remy. They would see and hear how different he was now and think Flo was right, that he must be under a spell. Then they would cut us all down. Only because she knew that we could not stop her had Flo divulged her intentions. Before anyone could move against the Ariel, she acted. In the space of a breath, Flo hoisted and stabbed her spear, not at Joseph or I, but at Remy. She forced her weapon between his steepled wings, impaling and pinning the two together. The traitor barely accomplished this before she thrust into the sky, flying off. Remy, the other Ariel, was the only one of us who could have caught her. Now there was no stopping Flo. She would reach the castle first and poison everyone against us, making our return impossible. Our group was as good as banished now, but that was nowhere near our minds at the moment as we rushed to Remy to help him. Well, Joseph and I did. I turned and saw that May was dashing to her manticore, to Guts. She was no sooner in the saddle than the animal leapt forward, thundering across the plains. May pursued Flo from the ground. What was a pointless effort. She'd never be able to reach her. But I had forgotten a stunt that I'd seen the amalgam perform back in the paddock. That is, until I saw it performed again in the plains. The manticore reached its top speed before coming to a jarring halt and bucking its rider into the sky. May fired like a missile. She was a missile with her spear outstretched. Flo, hearing, or maybe just sensing the danger, paused mid-air and turned back just in time to be run through by her former friend. As before, May's wings flung out and she spiraled gracefully back to the ground. But this time she did so holding the body of Flo. They landed somewhere miles ahead of us. I knew we must get to them, but we had to see to Remy first.
Rhemigrayne, what do you want me to do?
Through! Pull it through!
All right, hang on. 1, 2... Can you move?
Cannot fly.
That's okay. You ride with me. Come on, we gotta go.
Remy stretched his wings out. There was a tear in both, the colorful membrane hanging loose from either wound. Suddenly, the bullet hole he returned with from Earth didn't look so bad. Joseph helped the Ariel atop Lomray as I climbed back into the saddle of Jellybean. Then we rode hard across the plains. It wasn't difficult to find where May and Flo had come down. We slowed and dismounted. Joseph stayed back with Remy as I went forward. May had pulled the spear free of the Ariel and thrown the weapon away. She now sat in the grass with a lifeless Flo in her arms. May cradled the body, her head bent over it. The traitor was splattered in her own blood, and it was showing at the corners of her mouth now as well. She had not died upon impact, but right before we caught up to them, we had arrived just in time to see the light in the Ariel's eyes go out. I couldn't not think of the witch just then. The Grimalkin had been the more powerful, but ultimately the lesser of our two foes. It was this one, the deceiver, who had taken the larger toll on us. And she had not done so with sorcery, but with lies. The amalgam lifted her head, then her eyes. Strands of her red hair drifted about a face contorted with sorrow. It had happened again. She'd been forced to kill a friend she regarded as a sister. Why? Why this cruel fate? We didn't know what else to do with Flo, and May gave no instruction. So Joseph and Remy came forward and gently pulled her from the amalgam's arms. The men carried the Ariel back to the downed airship and buried her among the wreckage so that we would know where to find her again if need be. Then, with one less among us, we resumed our journey home. In that time, May spoke not a word, not until we re-entered the dominion of the Strangels days later. She brought her mount to a stop in the savannah, in the same spot where our adventure on this other world had begun. Her voice wavered at first, but then strengthened. She said that we were to return our manticores to their stables. Then she and Remy would meet with Bruce, the keeper. There was much to tell. Joseph and I were to go to our cabin and wait for May there. She would be along tomorrow to update us on the state of things. We did just as she said. Once again, my husband and I found ourselves on the far side of the mountain, on the shore of the river, climbing up the ladder to our little abode. Before stepping through the red door, I looked to the clouded mountaintop, taking a moment to give silent gratitude. We'd brought our satchels with us from the stables, and from mine I removed the contact charger, setting it on the table. I second-guessed my decision to take it. Joseph was also torn. It could be a great help to us, but still, it was Nephilim technology. We agreed to keep it secret for now, and he put the device out of sight. The pair of us then shed our weaponry and armor, piling it all by the door. Our clothes were filthy from the adventure. We'd been given a second set to change into, but we needed to clean ourselves first. So just as we had our first day here, we went down to the river and, behind the partitions, bathed as quickly as we could in its frigid water. Then it was back into the cabin and to the fire we'd made. Having slept on the ground for so long, we happily returned to our hanging bed. I cuddled up to my husband and he put his arms around me. It was good to be back here. No, not good. It was more than that. I wasn't sure why until the next morning when May came to our door. She too had washed and changed. As ever, the amalgam was perfectly radiant with the least amount of effort. Then I realized why the cabin was better than before. It was home now. Officially. Despite resistance from the cadre, the Strangels had honored the terms of the quest and accepted us into their community. The amalgam announced us first and foremost. Then she joined us at the table, around which we sat and spoke more in depth. So they believed you and Remy? About everything? Even about Flo?
Yes.
Will they retrieve her body?
They will not. A contingent has been dispatched to the coast to retrieve those aerials we buried in the sand, but Flodoorwen will remain where we laid her, with the enemy.
I see.
What about Rhemigrayne?
He and I spoke privately after our meeting with Bruceval. Rhemigrayne will work to dismantle the cadre as best he can. He will not be able to turn them all away from their wrongdoing, but even still, we hope to restore our community now that the influence of the traitor and the witch has been removed. Thanks largely to the pair of you.
It's not our first time breaking a curse.
We are happy to have helped.
I guess it's lucky that we came along when we did, huh, Joseph?
It was not luck, my friends.
I'm sorry?
We believe it possible for the same prophecy to be fulfilled twice.
You mean the one that foretold a defender coming from Earth? You think that applies to us too?
There is more. While we were away, our prophets and prophetesses were given a vision of a great vessel and of the giants emerging therefrom.
Yeah, Circle City in 2060.
The vision was not of your world this time, Lindsay, but ours.
No.
What?
The sister vessel, the one that crashed into the ocean.
They're still alive down there?
It's an alien spacecraft designed to survive the unforgiving wastes of the cosmos. Of course it could survive at the bottom of the sea. I should have realized. But all the Nephilim should still be in stasis though, right?
They have awakened.
By what?
The ships were fully automated. It could be a failsafe of some kind. If the hull sprung a leak or something, it may have ejected their pods to save them.
Joseph, you said this second ship crashed on the other side of the planet, right?
It did, yeah, so even if they've gotten to the surface, it'll take them a long while to get back here, assuming they even try.
They will try.
But we have time, right? Because they're so far away?
Time to prepare, yes.
Maevalesse, if we're going to fight these things, we're going to need this planet's original giant slayer.
That is correct. We will need to retrieve Jonas Gentry and his family from exile.
And because of Clyde, we know where to find them now.
When do we leave?
In the spring.
The spring?
We have to wait that long?
The peninsula where they now live is very far, and the season is transitioning. Our winters are harsh, making long travel nearly impossible. We will have to wait for spring, yes, but this will give us the time we require to overturn the ruling of his banishment, so that when we return with Gentry and his family, they can take their rightful place here once more, assuming we can do so.
He still has enemies here.
Right, the cadre. It's only the three of us and Remy who know where he is, so we should keep that between ourselves for now, yeah?
Agreed.
Yes. We must move your things to the castle. Your chamber has been prepared in one of the east towers.
Actually, mate, we'd like to stay here if that's okay. At least for now.
Yeah, we kind of like the cabin. Would that be all right?
That should be acceptable. I will confirm it with the keeper.
While you're talking to him...
Yes?
Do you think you could persuade Bruceval to let us use the orb?
You wish to return?
Just briefly. Just long enough to send our story back.
Of course.
We figure we've earned this. You know, slaying the witch, saving the realm, and all that.
I will take your request to Bruceval.
One more thing.
Yes?
I wanted to say sorry.
For what?
For ever doubting you.
I do not understand.
I let Flo change my opinion of you. She told me lies about you. Lies I should have known better than to ever consider as truth.
Yes, well, she sought to divide us all. No apologies necessary, Lindsay.
But I just need to. I grabbed her, hugged her. May was startled by the forcible embrace and even resisted. You are my sister, and I am your sister. Her tensed body relaxed, and I felt her arms around me. We were sisters now, sisters from two different worlds. Then we loosed from our embrace and stepped back. Neither one of us was overly comfortable with the emotion welling up, so we cleared our throats and tried to move past the tender moment. Oh, and I promise to never again call you May. I know you're not a fan of it, so I will call you Maevalesse from now on.
Actually, Lindsay, May is acceptable to me.
Really? You finally like it? I knew it would grow on you eventually.
Oh, I continue to hate it. Perhaps more so than ever. But my proper name did not sound right coming from you just now.
Fair enough. It took a lot of convincing, but Bruce permitted us to use the orb. We would not do so for several weeks, however. We had to write and record the narrations for this season. Here is probably a good time to apologize for the near audiobook length of them. There was just so much to tell you. How could there not be when exploring an alien planet? I wish I could simply show you all that I saw, listener. But alas, I could only describe it to you, only paint the best possible word picture. Now, typically it's Sylvia and I who write up the narrations, but obviously she is not here for that, so this time Joseph helped me. Which could be why this season was extra wordy. You know how he is.
Hey.
But seriously, if any of our seasons needed his literary flourish, it was this one. We set up a little recording area here in the cabin with all the equipment we brought from Earth. Joseph is running the laptop for me as I record this. It's a good setup, and we'll continue to use it for as long as we're on this other world. And from the sound of it, our adventures here have only just begun. Oh, Joseph, we should probably record a teaser, huh? And I need to do a recap for Season 3 to send back as well. Don't let me forget those.
Got it.
Anyway, now it's just a matter of getting all this audio back to Sylvia. But it's gonna be tricky. We have to find the perfect place and time to open the wormhole. My husband has been returning to the savannah almost every day, to where we first came through the portal from Shady Hollow. That's our frame of reference for Earth. Remember, where the doorway is opened on one world corresponds to where it will open on the other. From there, he's been trying to map out where we should cross back over. You'll remember from Season 2 that he'd spent years looking for the Pendergast estate, so he came to know the outskirts of Circle City rather well. And now he thinks he's found the best place to use the orb, somewhere remote, with as few people around as possible, since magic portals tend to draw attention. The portal is quite the spectacle, especially when you're trying to sneak around, so we'll make the journey during the day on this world, what will be night for Earth. But even if no one sees the doorway, the Cabal will still detect it with that pesky PX-39 device that traces the formations of wormholes. And with such a heavy concentration of Heartland security present in Circle City already, it will not take them long to descend on our location. So we have to be quick. The plan is to cross over, find an internet connection, and upload all the audio to a drive I used to share with Sylvia. I just hope it's still active. She will get the notification of the upload and be able to pull all the audio before anyone else even knows it's there, which, if you're hearing this, was successful.
Yay.
All of these narrations and the field recordings will be on the laptop, so I'll have to take that with me. Since it'll be open and running, I plan to use the computer's mic to record our excursion back to Earth. Then I'll send that clip along with the other audio. If I know Sylvia, she'll want to tack it on to the end of our season finale. As for the actual use of the orb, Bruce will be handling that. He and his guard force will be present with us to make sure no one but us comes back through the portal. That was a non-negotiable part of his agreement to let us venture back. May and Remy will also be there, the two of them making sure that the door remains open and that no one tries to slam it closed behind us. As we've said, the cadre remains, so we have to be careful. Well, I think that's it, listener. The next thing you hear should be the live recording of our brief return to Earth. Apologies ahead of time for the audio quality. The laptop mic isn't great.
Maevalesse, May I see it? Bruce of all has it all wrapped up in that cloth. I would just like to...
Indeed.
Oh, wow.
Incredible. I have been reading about this for so long.
It looks just like the cover of our show. Like Grindel's painting. I hate to admit it, but he did a good job depicting the relic. But the glowing inside of it is... I could stare at it for hours. But we don't have time for that. We're ready now. Right, Joseph?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm actually eager to see the portal open from this side for once. Lindsay, take my hand.
Okay, good. There's nothing and no one around. Do you know where we are?
I think. The portal light is helping in the dark. Let's see. Yeah, there. Through the tree should be Highway 37. The Crossroads truck stop is on the other side.
Let's be swift. Do you have Wi-Fi here?
Yeah?
There it is. I have a signal. Beginning the upload now. It will be a couple of minutes.
Hi there. What's your name tag say? Chad. Hello, Chad. I know we must look pretty strange.
You guys, like, LARPers or something?
Are we what?
Live action roleplay. I have a cousin who does it.
Oh, yeah, that. We do that.
Cool. Your costumes are really good. That armor looks real.
Hey, thanks, What is that divine smell?
Huh?
Lindsay, you smell that?
All I smell is burnt truck stop coffee.
Yes, exactly. Here, let me have your sword.
Whoa there, bud.
What? What's wrong?
Is that real?
Oh, yes, very.
Okay, just be cool, man. Be cool. I only got like $40 in here, man.
What? Oh, I'm not robbing you. I want to trade.
Trade what?
For the coffee maker there, and all the coffee you've got in the back. It's probably a lot, right? Those big industrial-sized bags?
Yeah. We got the big bags for the big machine.
Great. So how about it?
How about what?
The trade. All of that for this sword. I promise you won't find another like it on Earth. Look at this hand-forged craftsmanship. Plus, it comes with history. It's killed werewolves and merfolk. It even took the head off of a shape-shifting witch. I did that part.
Did you now?
It's okay, she had it coming. Oh, if you look close, you can actually still see some of her blood, I think. You may want to wipe that off. So what do you say, Chad?
Yeah, man. Whatever you want.
Excellent, alright. You go grab the coffee, and I'm gonna get the machine. And this I will leave right here on the counter for you, my friend. Oh, could you bag it all up for me, please? We gotta be on our way here in a minute.
Sure, dude.
Come here, you.
What are you going to do with that?
I'm betting that the contact charger you swiped will work with this. Then we can have coffee, Lindsay.
Oh, good idea.
Here you go. This is all the coffee we had in the back.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. The company will replace this, right? It won't, come out of your paycheck or anything?
Not sure. Never had anyone steal the whole machine before.
Okay, well, if it does, wait for Season 4 of the Endless Elsewhere podcast to drop, and then put this sword on eBay. You'll make a fortune, I promise.
The Endless what?
Upload complete. Come on, Joseph.
Listen, Chad, some shady government types are gonna come through here before too long. You never saw us, okay?
Okay.
Joseph, hang on. There's a truck pulling in. 2 of them.
Dang.
Why do you care about the reefers?
Chad, do you mind if we leave through the back?
Do whatever, man.
Wait, what did you call them?
The trucks? They're reefers.
What? What is that? Are they like marijuana trucks or something?
No, dude. Reefers are refrigerated trucks. They've been coming through here for days now.
Heading into the city?
Yeah.
Joseph, what?
Get out of Circle City, Chad.
What?
Seriously, move away. Like tomorrow. Pack up and go. If there's anyone here you love, convince them to do the same.
Okay, man.
Come on, Lindsay, through the back.
Joseph, wait. What was that?
Those refrigerated trucks are full of the dead. The closed circle solution, remember? The Cabal have been collecting corpses from all over the country and bringing them here so that when the water tower goes live...
There will be an army of the dead, ready to swarm the streets. So it's starting. Should we stay? We have to stay, right?
How can we?
We have to help.
You're still recording, right?
Yeah.
Sylvia, tell Sorrels and the rest that it's time, that it's happening now. Okay, Lindsay, send that so we can get back.
Okay. I'm sorry we couldn't do more. Good luck, you guys. Remember, do good, fight evil, repeat. I'm Lindsay Leck, and this is the Endless Elsewhere podcast.